G'day guys, Calvin, Catching Company here. We're doing a link setup today for Brian Blank in Australia. Now I supplied him with a LINK unterminated wiring harness, a Fury X, some sensors, some connectors, and he's got in and has been wiring up a Celica. He's done some really cool little videos actually. Here he is. Here's Brian. And if I scroll along here, I will find his Celica, which is a pretty cool little car. 1UZ, of course. He's doing coil on plug and setting it up. I watched this video here, and it's kind of in the style of one of my setup videos, or a couple of my setup videos, and I found it in a style that I think would help a lot of people, because what he did is he took what I told him and he did his homework himself, and he sat down and he planned it all out himself, which is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Brian's got some good mechanical experience and good history in the mechanical fields. Not claiming to be an expert, but helping other people out and learning this stuff, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I really like that. So he sent me a map today. This was this one. I'm going to open it. He emailed it. E-throttle is disabled, which is good. Brian, it says here also that it's undisabled. Just flick me your code, please. The serial number. Actually, we'll do it now, shall we? Wait, I've got Brian. He's in Australia. It's not so late there as it is here, and I'll unlock his ECU for him. So if it brings up this warning here, this ECU is disabled, it's because it's disabled. Okay. So talk to the person you bought it from. They send them the serial number out of the ECU. Up here, there. Oh, I can't do it because it's not connected. Okay, but anyway, go there. There's a little serial number, and you can unlock it. I wonder if it's got it up in here. There it is. There. Ha! I'm just going to unlock Brian's ECU. Right, that's done. Okay, so Brian's asked, one of the first questions he's asked, and actually it's not the first question, if someone sends him a map, how does he put it into his computer? So you open your computer, whether you have it self-connecting, that's probably Brian actually. He'd actually already unlocked it because there was a code that existed. Anyway, so you connect to your ECU. You generally will save a copy of your file. Okay, so I recommend before loading anything up, even if it's just the base file that's in it, you do a save. And I'm going to do save as, and I'm going to put it into a certain folder so we know where it is. And I have all my tuning maps under non-VVTI. There'll be one for, and I'm going to do 01. And I'm going to save it. And then you will open the file that you want to open. Okay, I'm going to, in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another save as. And I'm going to put it in the same spot. And I'm going to try not to pause this as much as I can. There are going to be some things that I'm going to pause on it. And so I'm going to change this one now to 02. And I'm going to call it now there's a chance that Brian's got V1.0 because he's going to put V1. Or 2.0, 3.0, whatever. That's a system that he can use. That's fine. I'm using my one where I put the 02 at the front. And we push OK. Now let's say we want to go back to that first file that we started. And now he will have his computer attached, his ECU attached, sorry. And he will go file, and it will go open, and it'll say, hey, do you want to really do that? Are you sure you want to do that? And you'll go, yes, I do. And you'll save it and put it into the computer, and then it'll prompt you, say, hey, do you want to store it to your ECU, and do you want to save it? And you'll go, yes. And I recommend that each time you do what I just did, was save a copy of it, so you don't write over the original. So when you're changing stuff, you don't go back and write the original. Okay, so I've got Brian's tune that he just sent me, and now I'm in adjustment. This is going to be adjustment number 1. I'm not going to go back to the other one. We're going to stick with adjustment. And then he says about the fuel settings. So let's have a look what fuel settings he's got. Now he set this up from scratch, okay, which is pretty cool. Fuel main, sequential, traditional, map load. I prefer to tune in model, okay, and there's a little bit more to it. So when you're in traditional, if you want to change how much fuel it's getting, or one of the things you do when you set up, you change this milliseconds here, and you increase or decrease it really quickly to get it running about right. Have a look at this fuel table. Really big numbers at the top end, and KPA goes up to 120, probably a bit higher than we need to because it's an NA engine. I sometimes put like a 105. So how's about I go bang one of my fuel maps in it and we do a bit of a change around, and that will hopefully improve overall how it runs. Just going to look at what else we've got in here in the injector setup. 2D dead time table. Now even in a traditional setup, proper dead times are a good idea. Okay, if you, then the next one, the short pulse adder, if you don't have any numbers there, call them 0. It's the safest thing to do. Okay. Right. I am going to change this to modeled. Okay, and now this does a whole lot more calculations with regard to injector flow and how much fuel is going into the engine, airflows, VE calculations. There's a lot more happens in modeled. But from a tuning point of view, match the target table, the AFR target table, adjust your fuel table till it gets to the AFR table, and ta-da, it works. And then when you need to actually adjust your mixtures, your AFRs, just change your AFR table and the computer will do the rest. So that's really, really simple. So we need to have a 4000 cc engine. Overlay is if you're wanting to change lambdas for different setups. Okay, map referenced, base fuel pressure is going to be about there. And the rest of these numbers are actually pretty close. This is set up for petrol, okay? You can set them up for different fuels as well, in which you're going to change these numbers, but the base settings here come up for petrol. And now your dead times are going to be even more important. And your fuel table is going to be important as well. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of fiddling here for Brian and do a bit of a change around. I'm going to add a second table. I've got other videos on that. But I'm going to chuck some numbers in here and change these tunes based on one of my tunes, and it should be a little bit closer. Righto, so I've made those changes, and all of a sudden we've got fuel table 1 and fuel table 2, and I do that to make tuning much easier. I have 2 of them, and you can do several things. When you can get in a nice state of tune, what you can do is you can take table 1 and you put it into table 2. They're switched on an auxiliary in the computer. You can switch them on a dash switch as well. If you put a digital input to your switch, to your computer, sorry, and you can switch them and you can go, well, this one goes better on this day or whatever. Or you can tune it and then you can continue the tune. You've still got that one stored in the background. Different ways of doing stuff. So I've tapped in fuel table 1, fuel table 2. That's good. And we probably should put a lambda table in because that's the one that the Link has. I'm going to put in my one Now I want to just show you how to copy and paste. There's my table. I go right click, export to clipboard, export to clipboard. You go back to Brian's tune. We confirm up there very quickly just by looking at it. We go, yep, that's the Celica one. Now this is my starting target table, okay? And I do this because you work from richer to leaner when you're tuning. And it's not so rich that it's going to cause problems, but this is how I set mine up. And then when you've got the tune pretty well right, you can change the target table, and the mixtures should stay on point, providing the other settings are pretty close. Things such as your charge temps and your injector dead times and things like that. And it's a really easy way to set it up, and you can just adjust the target table. Bang, mixture's good. Thank you very much. Moving on. Confirm it. Brian's got a Fury, which means it's got a built-in wideband, and that's why he chose it. It was actually really interesting. He was very decisive on what he wanted. A lot of people come to me, I want a LINK ECU. Good, which ECU? There's lots of different options. Group injection, sequential injection, budgets, all those sorts of things. But Brian already knew all that. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed that, actually. It's saying something because, oh wait, he's not actually an Australian. He just lives in Australia. I think, I've got a feeling he might be a Kiwi. From a very young age, he moved to Australia. Anyway, so there's some target tables. That should give you some numbers that are close enough to get it going. And of course, I'm going to save that as I go along. That's what I always do. Okay. Now he asks about pre-start prime, pre-crank prime. So it's under the cold start. We've got pre-crank prime, and he asked whether it gets done on the dyno. This is a little bit by experience. You get a bit of a feel for it. I like to turn it on, and I like to have that key start input position. Okay, ignition start. No, I don't want to set it to 0. What I'm going to do is I cheat a little bit because I've got these maps set up. I just go over here and I go to my pre-start prime under here, and I go like this, and I go export. I know it's cheating. You get a bit of a feel for it, and you can adjust it if it doesn't start quite right. You get a feel. Now you've got a pre-start prime. Now, why do I have it on a start input? That's so each time you turn the key on. So if it was on key on, every time you turn the key on, it's going to fire those injectors for whichever temperature it is, those number of milliseconds. So it's more likely to flood the engine. Whereas if you have it only on crank, it's only going to come on when it sees that start input. Now Brian has set me an input, an I/O list. I'm wondering on the digital inputs whether he's put a start input. Now G4X is cool for the fact that I can just go down to input pins, oil pressure switch, AC request, and wheel speed. Do we have an oil pressure sensor as well? I'll have to find out about that. Okay. There's no start input in the list. Let's look at his I/O list. Starter output. He's got to have a start input in here somewhere, because he was telling me about, there it is, digital input 4. Okay, so I'm going to go here, and I suspect Brian's going to go through and sort of copy my video and go through and do this. Digital input 4. Now you can't just go here and do stuff, okay? It doesn't work. You have to go to start position up here, then you turn it on, and then you put it into DI4, which is good, and we're going to have it on an active state high. So that means it's got 12 volts when it's on. Feeds 12 volts out, or feeds 12 volts to the ECU, and it will pick it up. That's why we have the pull-up resistor off. If you're having it in a low input, like an earth input, then you often have the pull-up resistor on. Okay. Right, so now we've got a start input, and that'll help with that pre-start prime. Now let's have a look at the other cold start settings. Now, in an ideal world on model fueling, if you have your charge temperature correct, then you don't need some fueling, or cold start fueling. This one, now there's a little bit on when you're in configuration, you have the help menu to work through, and it explains if it's reading off the air temp or the water temp sensor for the charge temperature. Okay, and that's again to do with the modeled fueling. I'm going to find some numbers that are close enough for them to get them going on a reasonable charge temp table. It's going to alter a little bit on the setup, air filters, all those sorts of things. Okay, this is a charge temp table that I've used for the air temp sensor mounted just before the throttle body, or just before the throttle butterfly, in the throttle body modification that I do. And it generally works pretty good. And so that can change the mixture based on whether it's going more off the water temp sensor, the engine coolant temperature, or the air temperature sensor. Got to use a fast acting sensor in good airstream, and so when you've got more airflow, it's factoring more so off the air temp sensor. And in fact, often I find through here it's actually closer to a 0, and over here, about here, it's actually closer to a 15. Okay, and so I'm going to save that again, and we're going to continue. So there's some start inputs. Now this one, ideally you would set it that the charge temp table does, or on model fuel, that you don't need any additional start fuel. In reality, most of the time, and time on the dyno, it costs a lot of money. So most of the time we do end up with a little bit of crank enrichment, and we also end up with some post-start, but those numbers are going to be really quite low. Okay, and those ones are quite low. And we've got post-start and then warm-up. So they're going to be quite low numbers because the computer and the model fueling is doing most of the work. Don't get too caught up on the cold start stuff until it's been tuned. Okay, because a lot of the cold start is based on the tune. It's a percentage of. So get it running, get it good enough, get it driving a little bit, put some road numbers in it, happy, and then come back to the starting. That's a really good way to go. If it starts good enough initially, then that is actually good enough. As I said, come back to it once the tune numbers are a lot closer. Right, let's find out some other setups. Now, I was going to ask Brian about the oil pressure. We're going to set up some sensors, and then, but I'm just going to ask about oil pressure for a moment. Right, Brian sent me a list of inputs and outputs, and there's a start in, there's ignition in. He actually asked about the ignition in on a post on Facebook, and really good discussion actually, really neat. That's kind of an optional. But I like to put it in as a diagnostics. Something you can also do if you've got extra digitals or you've got extra analogs is you can wire them in things like your injector power feed and your core power feed. And then you can actually monitor whether those items have got power going to them You can use a analog as a digital by just setting it up as a 0 volts is off, 5 volts is on. It'll take a 12 volt to it, but it'll only register up to 5. And then you can set up, so it tells you if a fuse is blown or there's something else wrong in the vehicle. Just some thoughts. Now we're looking here. We see here digital input 1 is oil pressure. Digital, he's got the Bosch combo sensors, and I thought I sent him Bosch combo sensors. Now I work on a lot of vehicles, guys, and so sometimes when I'm working on these, guys go, well, why is he asking me this question? Why he's supplied that stuff? Yeah, I talk to a lot of people every day, and I don't remember everybody's setup. I remember some of my setups. These days I have to check more because I do so many. So I just ask. And so that's why if you're working with me and I ask what seems like a bit of a strange question that you think I might know, it's because I've talked to 3 or 4 or 5 other people today. I've been working on 2 other vehicles today with LINK ECUs. Okay, I've worked on it was an Atom and a Extreme. And that's very normal for me to work on that sort of number of vehicles. So we've got oil. We've got coolant temp here. That's good. We've got air temp, fuel temp, and oil temp. Let's just go check them and see how Brian got on. Come on. There it is. Now, again, the great thing about this, when we go down to analog inputs, I'm just going to flick this up. We're going to go to analog inputs. And I can just scroll down when I put my hand in the right place, and I can go on inputs, and we have an ECT on temp 1. We have an IAT, and there's a little thing here. Oh, no. It still catches me out a little bit. I do like the G4X, the way it's set up though. IAT, there it is. So this one's here, we've got a temp, good, AN temp 2. This is the error value, so if it gets unplugged or something goes wrong with the sensor, it can pick up errors. This one and this one, you want them as sort of closer to what they would normally run out in the normal operating range. So you try and close up the tolerance a little bit without going to a point where it's going to throw phantom codes all the time, because that's just a pain. If you want to turn your fault codes off, 0 and 5 turns the fault codes off. Handy for things like wideband sensors, analog widebands, where they do have a 0 volt. Okay, and the error value helps with all those other corrections. So say, because air temp of course is used for your fuel correction, and there might be a timing correction for air temp. So if it drops to 0, it could do some strange things potentially. So I would normally put it to sort of 25 to 30, kind of a normal operating range. So it'll try a check light. Yes, good if you've got an engine check light set up. It'll give an error value on your dash if you set that up. But then it sets it to a value that the computer can still run on. Right? And this is what we talk about limp mode. It's a programmed setup. So we can set up our limp mode as such and give that sensor a value that allows us to get home. And in fact, if you set that up right, the vehicle will run absolutely perfectly fine in limp mode. Okay, lots of guys just call things limp mode just when their cars are stuffed and running badly or misfiring or the engine's falling out, and they call it's limp mode. And we better do the same for water temp. Okay, so we're going to go up here, ECT, error value at 0 degrees. So suddenly, if it faults and you're at 0 degrees, you're going to run incredibly rich. It's going to put any cold start fueling in. Bam, that's going in there. Probably not a good setup. I go the other way. I want fans to switch on. I want the engine to run reasonably well still. Okay, so I'll bring a check light on. We've got potential for a fault code there. Again, they should be tightened up once you get that thing running. And we're going to chuck in an error value of fans plus a little bit more, 105. 105. And if it hits 150 degrees, you've really got a problem. Error value, I'm going to put an error value a little bit lower, 125. You can probably bring that down. So again, it'll bring a fault code up. It'll bring a fault for that sensor if it gets over 125 degrees. If it's reading over 125, it goes, there's a problem. Now this error value means that also, so that if an error value of 105 means that if it faults, it's going to be really hard to start in the morning. But if it faults when you're out running, when it's warm, the fans will flick on. So clue, hey, the temp gauge isn't very hot, but both my fans are on. Why? Because we've got a failed sensor. And though if you're running a dash, it's running off that sensor. So maybe the dash will go, well, actually, no, it won't. Because as soon as it goes to error value, it'll bring up 105 on the dash. Okay, and so you go, oh, it's sitting at 105. Fans are on. A minute ago it was 85 and suddenly it just jumped to 105 because there's a fault. But hopefully your dash will set up and give you a fault. Check light will come on. Right, that's ECT. Then we have fuel temperature, yes. And again, we have to come up here. Fuel temperature, AM volt 3, 0. So we're going to go 0.05, and 4.95. So we'll give a fault code. Error value of 20 degrees. It's probably about right. Now you see here there's no calibration. So it needs a calibration. We need to tell it what it is. Bosch is, and it's a combo sensor. Real simple, we just call it an NTC, negative temperature coefficient. Please tell me I didn't go far. I did. Standard Bosch NTC. We can check those values too. So we can use our, either under the tuning here. Nah, it's not there. IAT, ECT and IAT, they're there. If we go tuning, runtime values, general, we've got oil temperature, fuel temperature should be pretty close together, same as engine coolant temp and inlet air temp. They're all going to be pretty close because they're all on the same calibration. Okay, back to there. And let's do temp 4, which is, there it is oil temperature. Temp 4. I want a fault code for it. Oh, it's getting late here. And error value, what error value we're going to give it. So oil temperature is going to run pretty close to water temp. I want it to sit up where it's not going to cause any problems. If you've got fans or other auxiliaries or things happening to on oil temp, consider your error value. Okay, so if say you had an oil cooler with a that was triggered by either water temp and oil temp, then if it has a fault, make sure that error value is above that fan trigger level. And calibration, we're going for NTC again. Of course, I know this because he's running a combo sensor. We're going to save that. Okay. Right. Now the next one is fuel pressure and setting up calibrations for fuel pressure. Again, that Bosch sensor. It's a 10 bar, which effectively is like 145 psi. If you want to get really pedantic on us, you can put in separate calibration tables. Let's have a look here. Map sensor, it's good, okay. And map sensor's here. He's telling me he's got a 4 bar map sensor. Okay. To tell you the truth, I don't remember what sensor I sent him. It was a long time ago. It's one of those things. Oh, I better ask him, eh? Okay, well, while we're waiting for that, and of course, well, Once he's got his correct map sensor in, he does need to do a calibration. You can do it either here or you can do it up here. Map sensor calibration. It's about to go ding my phone, and that'll be Brian answering. I can hear him typing. There's little lines, little circles on the messenger. I'm not going to get through all this tonight. Brian will understand. We'll do a bit more in the morning. Jason's under control tomorrow, so that'll be good. 3.5 bar link. Pretty sure. You've got a 3 bar or a 4 bar, Brian. You can't give me a 3.5. You've got a 1.15, which is good. You're a 2 bar? 2.5 bar. 2.5, 3, 4. He'll check that tomorrow. He can see that on himself. He's a big boy. So again, fault value, if it gets to 2000 kPa, which is a lot, then it has a fault. Backfires, things like that, could bring up fault value. So you could probably drop that down quite safely to like 300, but they're better. We'll see what Brian said. He said it's raining. He's not going to go outside. It's cold here too, and it's been raining. And actually, my road slipped the other day. I'm not going to put it in now. I'm not even going to edit this video when I'm done. I'm just going to send it. Okay, so hopefully I haven't said anything wrong. Right, let's sort some oil pressure and fuel pressure. Fuel pressure on there. Okay, so we up here, fuel pressure. Fuel pressure. So AMV4. Again, we want some fault codes because those sensors are good, but if they get unplugged, it'll bring up a fault code. So we go 4.95. And again, same deal as you can tighten up the calibration. AMV4, error value. So depending on how you can set up it on the tuning that with a fuel pressure sensor, it'll actually change the fueling as well, which is really cool. In which case, if you have a fuel pressure failure, it'll put a lot of fuel in if it goes to 0. And that's fine if you want to put a 0 value. I'm actually going to put in half of 50 kPa, which is like £7. And then we need to put a calibration in. Now, this one's something that he did ask about. Fortunately, like you can add your own custom calibrations. I've got another videos on that. But he's running a Bosch 10 bar, which happens to be 1000 kPa. It says 150 psi, which is actually 145. This one will be just fine. Okay, and I push OK, and we calibrate, and I'm going to save that. I want to save it because I want to be able to see it. And so he's got his oil pressure as a switch, not a sensor. So he does need to swap that around. He'll be watching this. As soon as I get this uploaded tonight, he'll be watching it, I'm sure. I'm going to put it on number 5. So oil pressure. We're going to put it on volt 5. He can just pop pins out of one pin, put it into the other plug. Easy as. What is with this today, bringing up these weird values? Oil pressure, and again, I'm going to go 50. And calibration, I'm going to make it that same 150 psi. So it's real simple. You can put in calibration tables. Let's have a look. We'll have a very quick look, shall we? So here we've got calibration tables. So on a oil pressure, for example, fuel pressure, so you give it a label. And you'd put, I'm just going to call it, so it doesn't get confusing, random. My ram is out in the paddock. He's about to become a daddy. Random sensor. Now we push OK. Input value of 0.5. Top value is 5 volts. And then you put your output units, whether it's a pressure, temperature, whatever. We're going to make it a pressure sensor. And this one is going to be 0. So at half a volt, it's going to be 0 kp. And this one's going to be 1348. and then you can save that. And then, of course, you can use that in that calibration file. You can go down to linear calibration 1. You can do this with any sensors, and then there's also calibration tables, which is a similar process. Not that important. We can use that TI sensor, and we can move on. We're already half an hour into this. Righto. I've got setting up pressure. It's got some basic engine protection settings. Now, I think that's a really good topic, and it's on my list over here. I wrote down oil pressure protection video. And I'm just going to touch on it. We want to get the engine running, but in here we've got a rev light. Is it okay? Fuel cut. You've got a choice whether you do a fuel cut or ignition cut. Okay, up to you. And they both have their own pros and cons. Okay. It's like a whole topic on itself when it comes to setting that up. Okay, in this case, make sure you have a rev limit in it. Okay, pretty simple. It's a 1UZ, so around 6.5 to 7 is for a stock UZ. Okay, and it'll alter depending on the driving style that I've got. If it's a race car and you need that extra little bit of legs between gear, put down a straight, or for a corner to save a gear change, I'm okay revving them to 7 grand every now and again. If someone's going to be sitting at the rev limit at 7 grand, it is going to explode at some point a lot sooner. Okay, so I don't do that. If I bring it down a little bit. Okay, so we wanted a rev limit. That's important, and we can put in some safety cuts. So I'm going to do another video another day on that topic, setting up oil pressure safety cuts. We use it on Jace Brown's drift car, and it's a fantastic topic that I've been wanting to cover for a while. Okay, system voltage limit is also important. 18 volts, that's fine. If you get to 18 volts, you've really got some problems. You can probably drop that down a little bit, actually. It is set quite high, so it's probably, but it's not going to damage the ECU at that. The lights are going to glow like crazy. The fuel pump's going to hum. So be real careful with your safety cuts that you don't start putting in like pseudo cuts for stuff, because that can be really upsetting. Start with a wider gap and then bring that tolerance down for those safeties. Right, what do we got to see? There was some drive-by-wire throttle. That again is almost a topic on its own. So I think I'm going to have to come back to that. Not control settings. Yeah, CAN. Okay, CAN wiring is good. And setting up the e-throttle. So I'm going to put them on a list of things to do. We might do that tomorrow, actually do some of that. CAN set up, how to actually wire that setup. Now, people get stressed out about the CAN. It's actually really simple. Okay. There's a few tricks. If you've got a really long bus, and I'm going to start using words, and if your wires are really long, you need a terminating resistor in that setup. If you've got, so for example, if you're running a CAN lambda and it's a long way away, then you need a terminating resistor. Some dashes have terminating resistors in them. Some gauges have terminating resistors in them. So the terminating resistor is in the unit that you're attaching to that CAN setup. In which case you don't need a terminating resistor in the bus and the wiring. I actually used to put resistors in, but with the advent of more and more devices with terminating resistor in them, then I don't run them. Now, how do we wire it? If we're not sure, we use the help file. So we go help. We do contents. Wiring information. Yeah, let's do that. Communication port. I'm not sure it's going to be in there. See what's in here. CAN bus wiring. So here's a recommended setup. Okay. A little read of this is important. Now here we talk about the resistor, 120 ohm resistor. It says here that G4X ECUs contain a terminating resistor, so that's at one end of the bus. So say we have this as device A as the ECU, that contains, so this becomes device A, it's got the resistor in it. Then we've got out, we can have another device on it, branched off, and another device branched off on it. But the last device in the bus, in the wiring, needs a terminating resistor. As I said, and I say here it's got a display link's got one in it. Other devices have terminating resistors in them. So just be aware of that when you're wiring it up. Twisted wire, twisted pairs. And I use, it's got a picture here on the little ECU header plug. I use the one in the main wiring connector. So if I go here, he's got a Fury header plug, and he's got it listed here. CAN 2, there's your CAN. I'm not sure what device, he's going to put a dash on it, I think. Pretty sure Brian's putting a dash on it. Again, we can look here, and he's got it listed. CAN. He's got some speed sensors. He's got a question about speed sensors too. Now, can you print the pinout map once populated with outputs? I don't think you can. Haltech you can, which is kind of a cool feature of Haltech, and I'll get in trouble for mentioning that in a link video. But it is really cool how you can do that on a Haltech. But I don't know of it in the link. Now, I could be wrong. Someone watching this might be able to correct me, but I don't believe you can. What I can't use leftover injection and coil outputs for? How are you going to have leftover coil and, you've got two coil outputs, don't you? So two ignition outputs. Pretty much anything you want. How can you tell? This is really easy. I'm glad we got a nice simple question. We go here. Watch this. We go up here. We go to, we're going to do auxiliary outputs. Auxiliary outputs. We come down here. And output pins. This is output fan 1, injection, sequential injection. This is pretty cool about a Fury. You get sequential injection on a 8-cylinder. You still get wasted spark, which is still good. And then, you've got fuel pump and AC clutch on those ones. You can use them for whatever's listed, if it brings it up in the list. So if I go up here and say engine fan, and I go, it's on auxiliary 1, output 2, if I go here, if it brings it up in this list, then I can use it. If it doesn't bring it up the list, you can't use it. Unless you make it up in the list and you call it an auxiliary output and you make it up and it can bring it up in the list again. As a GP output. So you can use them for a lot of things. There are some restrictions with regard to your PWM outputs. So on how much or the frequency it can do a pulse width modulation output. So I generally use it for like digital outputs. Perfectly fine. And I tend to use those leftover ignition or injection outputs for just digital ones. High U frequency PWMs I tend to use on the auxiliary outputs, and I think more 1 to 4 tends to be higher than the others. It is listed in the manual, in the help menu. Right, so that answers that question. That's good. Not control we will look at another time, and that's setting up that dry ball wire. There's quite a lot to that, and I think that's but really good questions. I've just been, so here, more for your video. I've just been assigning AN volts for 6, 7, and auxiliary 3 for ignition in, starter in, SATA signal out. Also, vehicle speed sensors. Now, vehicle speed sensors, I think, are a great idea. I like speed input. I use the links to calibrate. So that's a digital input for speed. And you can choose whether it's on a driven wheel or like a wheel speed sensor. So let's have a quick look. Digitals, we're just going to pop this out. We haven't done any of the outputs now. I have another note about the state, whether it's driving high or it's driving low. So we will cover that tonight, and then I'm going to call it a wrap. We are going to go down to digital inputs. Digital inputs. Now he's got, what's he got in here? He's got an AC request, start position, which we've just covered the start position. Oil pressure switch is probably going to be moved. It's probably going to be a pressure sensor. Brian's going to sort that. AC request. So again, there's the AC request. We come up here. Australian guys in Australia love AC. So I've actually integrated an AC input on my looms, or the ability to control that clutch. And you know it's getting late when you can't see it in the list. Now, one thing, again, late. If you find it's not in that list in the digital, you think, well, where else? How else do we control it? And you'll also see up in here for the input fins. Also, for the outputs is no fan outputs because it's controlled elsewhere in the ECU. Things like the throttle position sensor, there's only a throttle position sensor input in the list. There's no sub throttle position sensor because that's part of drive-by-wire. So we look at body and chassis to find AC clutch control. The output is on ignition 6, which is good. The input request is on DI2. And so in this case, and this is, let's cover this high-low state as well because it covers inputs as well as outputs. So for example, if the switch input is a 12 volt input, it's a high input. So 12 volts is high. If we were feeding it as an earth, it would be low. And that's when we would employ our pull-up resistor if we were driving it to low. Okay. The latch is if you want it to like be a switch and it holds it on, like it's just a pulse switch and it holds that on. So we've got the request sources on DI2, which is correct, and the output is on ignition 6, and it's on basic. So pretty much it gets an input. It does the idle speed thing, so that's set in the idle speed control, the AC up, and then if you go over 80% throttle, it will turn the AC pump off to give you more power to the engine because that's what you're trying to do if you're over 80%. So the state high or low means that it's going to come in as a high level as a 12 volt input. So you make sure your wiring is correct. Now he's asked about we were looking at something else in the digitals. Wheel speed. Start and position we've done. Now again, this we've got turbos, 2-stroke reverse turbo speed now been added. Again, we go down to the chassis. And we've got, there's some starter control, which is cool, but gear speed sources. So that's why it's down in there. And you can say which one, where it is, where it's coming in, and you set up your speed inputs. Okay, so we're not going to cover that too closely today. I would have liked them actually to have in here to have a gearbox output as well. Right. Driving. I still would prefer it if it was just had like a gearbox output shaft or a vehicle speed sensor, but they have 4-wheel speed sensors. Right, now we're going to do a quick look just at the outputs, high-low, which was something that Brian was asking about, and then I'm going to call it a night and hit the sack. Auxiliary outputs. Engine fan, there's our fuel pump output. Function on, off, and then that is okay. So standard fuel pump control method means it's just controlling a relay. There's no engine speed, there's no secondary control, fuel speed, no resistors, just a standard setup. What channels have we got? 2 relay, 3 relay, 3 relay with PWMs. Okay, so there's quite a lot there. Closed loop fuel pressure control, so it controls the pressure that's out there. It's on ignition 5, so Brian's worked out we can use ignition 5 for other things, which is good. If you want to test the output, you use this on, off, and low. That means it's going to drive when it's on. The active state is going to be low. It's going to be an earth output. It's not going to be a 12 volt. If you go to high, it will output a 12 volt. It isn't available on all outputs, and then you can test it. 5 seconds of prime is a lot of priming, but that's your own choice of where you want to put that. Okay, so low, it's going to drive to ground. Okay, and I think we've got a fan. Do we have a fan output? Engine fan control here. And again, it's driving, active state is low, so it's going to go to ground, which is the most common for most of the vehicles that I work on. I drive it to ground, okay? Fan is, see here it's got it at 94 degrees, and you see I noticed that I put the other one at 105 for the fan, for the default setting for the water temp. So I could set it at 95, it's still going to do the job. But if you had 2 fans, the other one's at 96. Hence, here's my 105. Right. It's got a bit. I get a bit long-winded here. Knock control at the moment. I just want that knock control turned off, so we can set it up on another day. It's off. That's easy. Driver wire. That one I'm actually going to go offline here. I'm going to throw some PWM, some PID numbers into it. They're going to be close enough for Brian that he can hopefully calibrate it and set it up tomorrow, because I'm just going to use some that I use. Kind of cheating. I will do another video on driver wire setup. I think I've got one somewhere. I'll see if I've got one. And hopefully we can hear this one starting and running tomorrow. Fingers crossed. No, not luck. It's to do with skill. Hope that's been helpful, and I hope that's been good, Brian. Definitely bedtime for me. We'll talk tomorrow. Catch you later. Yeah, I know. I was going to bed. Look, I went into the help file, and I did a search for Bosch throttle body, and it brought up specific e-throttle applications, and guess what? There's the connector. There's some information about it. There's the part numbers 82 or 54. It'll work for the 70, 74 as well. There's the wiring. Here's some expected values, and this is when you do your setup. There'll be your expected values, and look at this: 10,000 hertz, proportional gain of 4, 0.08, and 50. So it's there when you go looking for it, and the guys at the help desk at Link are really helpful. And I've talked to them about a lot of things, but they often go, "Would you look in the help file?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I looked in the help file, I couldn't find it." And they go, "Did you search for this?" And I go, "No." So there we go. I searched for it. I found it. Now I'm going to bed. I am going to send this map to Brian right now because it's not this late in Australia. Catch you later. Again.